They called him Lord, prayed for his storms, begged for his rain, and built their world around his power. He shattered the sky, crushed the sea, and dragged life from the scorched dust. And yet, he lost. They rewrote his name, twisted his rites, and turned worship into blasphemy. He was buried beneath centuries of scripture, vilified and summoned only in nightmares. Now they say he wears 3 faces. They say he commands legions. They say he never forgot. This is Pantheon Mythology, and this is Baal. If you too are summoned only in nightmares, then check out Pantheon Apparel, our clothing brand inspired by myths, legends, and folklore. We ship worldwide and are rated excellent on Trustpilot. Link in the description. Before he became a demon, Baal was simply Lord. That's what the word means, a title. In ancient Semitic cultures, it was given to powerful deities, rulers, or even local gods. But over time, Baal rose above the others. Baal-Hadad, the storm god of Ugarit. He was the weather, the rolling thunder was his voice, the lightning his weapon, the rain that soaked the fields kept civilization alive. That was Baal's mercy. In the 14th century BCE city of Ugarit, carved into clay tablets in cuneiform script, a story was preserved, one that shows just how terrifyingly vast his reach once was. The Baal cycle. It was sacred myth, recited by priests and used to explain why the world lived or died. Baal's enemies were not mortal kings or armies, but forces of chaos, primordial, relentless, and hungry. First came Yam, the god of the sea, a tyrant. His waters threatened to swallow the land. Baal confronted him with violence. He forged a war club, smashed Yam's skull, and then carved order out of drowning madness. But the sea was only the beginning. Baal then built his palace high atop Mount Zephon, a throne among the clouds. He was king now, but even kings die. Enter Mot, the god of death and sterility. No storms, no rain, just silence. Mot swallowed Baal whole and cast the world into drought. Crops failed, animals died, the people begged, but no thunder came. But Baal didn't stay dead. With the help of his sister Anat, a warrior goddess drenched in blood, he was freed, returned from the underworld, struck down Mot, and the rains fell once more. This was the cycle of the seasons, bound in violence. Although he wasn't a kind god, he was a necessary one. And necessity has never cared if you're afraid. To understand Baal's terror, you have to understand his power, and that power came from worship. He feared, yet he was relied on. In the lands of Canaan, Phoenicia, and beyond, his name filled the air like storm clouds over dry earth. Favor meant survival, absence meant famine, and so his worship wasn't gentle. Temples were raised on hilltops, high places closer to the sky where his thunder was loudest. Priests offered sacrifices, sometimes of animals, sometimes more. Fires burned through the night, the scent of blood, ash, and incense filled the altars. These were pleas, demands, bargains struck in fear of silence. When the rains failed, it was punishment, and the only response was to try harder. Louder prayers, harsher offerings. It's in these moments that Baal's cult becomes infamous. Ancient texts speak of child sacrifice, the ultimate gift to awaken a sleeping storm god. Whether these accounts were accurate or accusations, the fear was real. Parents brought their children to the flame, believing Baal might bring the rain. His priests were intermediaries between man and storm, wielding power in temples, in politics. Kings aligned themselves with Baal to claim legitimacy. Crops, warfare, royal authority, all of it was wrapped around his name. He was the storm behind the crown, the thunder behind the throne. But with power comes rivalry. His dominance made him a threat to other gods and to other cultures. As Yahweh's worship rose in ancient Israel, Baal became a rival, a god whose rituals were rebranded as evil, whose power was framed as false. The war between gods was no longer fought in myth, It was being fought in the hearts of the people, and Baal was losing. He became the enemy of a rising faith. As ancient Israel shifted from polytheism towards monotheism, Yahweh wasn't the only god in the land. He was one of many, and Baal, the storm god, was his chief rival. Storm god versus storm god. They offered the same things: rain, crops, survival, but in the eyes of Yahweh's prophets, there could only be one Lord. The result was a religious disagreement, a theological war. In the Book of Kings, we're brought to Mount Carmel. The land is in drought, the people are desperate, and the prophet Elijah throws down a challenge. 450 prophets of Baal gather on one side. Elijah stands alone on the other. 2 altars are built, 2 sacrifices are laid, but no fire is lit. Whichever god answers with flame will prove his power. The prophets of Baal scream, they chant, they cut themselves until blood soaks the stones, but nothing comes. Then Elijah steps forward. He soaks his altar in water, raises his eyes, and calls once. Fire falls from the sky. It devours the sacrifice, the stones, the water, everything. The people fall to their knees, and the prophets of Baal are slaughtered where they stand. From that moment, Baal is no longer a rival, but a symbol of betrayal. The book of Hosea compares his worship to adultery. To love Baal is to cheat on God. It's foolish, it's obscene, it's punishable. Baal worship is heresy. The Swift was cultural. Baal represented older ways, foreign powers, rival kingdoms. Dismantling him was about control. The old gods destroyed. Baal, once lord of the storm, was dragged from his mountain and buried in shame. They didn't stop with his burial. They kept digging. By the time the ancient world gave way to medieval Europe, his temples were ruins, his name slandered, his memory fractured. But in secret, in the pages of forbidden books written by mystics and occultists, he returned as a demon. He appears at the very beginning of the Ars Goetia, the first and most infamous book of the Lesser Key of Solomon. This grimoire, compiled in the 17th century from older magical texts, claimed to contain the names and powers of 72 spirits that King Solomon had bound in brass vessels. Baal is the first spirit listed, not a footnote, not an afterthought. He leads the procession of demons. Here he is called a king, ruling from the east, commanding 66 legions of infernal soldiers. His power is described plainly. He grants invisibility to those who summon him. It isn't framed as a trick or illusion. In the language of grimoires, it is control, the ability to vanish from the world and act without witness. But it is his appearance that disturbs. The text claims he takes the form of a man, a cat, and a toad all at once, 3 heads speaking in unison. A blend of predator, poison, and humanity. The toad, a symbol of the damp and the dead, the cat of silence and cunning, the man, a reminder of what he once ruled. Together they form something unnatural, not terrifying by scale, but by composition, a thing not meant to be. His voice is said to be hoarse, as if burned or buried. It rasps. This is not the voice that once shattered the sky. It's the voice of something that has been silenced for too long. The Ars Goetia warns the practitioner Baal must be summoned with precision. His seal must be drawn correctly. His name must be spoken with clarity. His sigil must be worn on the chest, or he will not obey. And disobedience from a king of hell is retribution. Some versions of the grimoire spell his name Bael, a small change born of Latin scribes and translations, but the entity is the same. This is the Baal once worshipped on hilltops, now pulled from heaven and chained in ritual. He no longer brings storms. He answers them. Baal's legacy festered. The most infamous accusation attached to his name was child sacrifice, and it stuck. But it didn't start with him. The Bible speaks of Moloch, a foreign god said to demand children burned alive in the valley of Hinnom, a place of fire, ash, and screaming. But in many of the same texts, Baal appears too, sometimes beside Moloch, sometimes instead of him. The fires are always burning, the lines are never clear. In time, they were treated as the same. Baal's name absorbed the horror. The screams meant for Moloch were now his. Whether he ever demanded such rights didn't matter anymore. He had become the symbol of everything unspeakable. The valley of Hinnom would become Gehenna, the archetype of hell, and Baal, by association, became the king of God who didn't rule over life, but one who led the damned. Even centuries after his worship had vanished, the fear persisted. His name appeared in accusations of witchcraft. He was blamed for stillbirths, for madness, for failed harvests. His name turned up in exorcisms, in dreams, in the confessions of the tortured. Even now, long after the true altar was torn down, Baal's name refuses to disappear. In modern conspiracy theories, especially among Christian fundamentalist groups, he is invoked as the symbol behind supposed satanic cults, blood rituals, and political corruption. He is named alongside Moloch, Baphomet, and Lucifer, accused of pulling strings behind governments and media. His name still works, as a weapon, as a placeholder for everything feared, but not understood. At the same time, in scattered corners of the neo-pagan revival, there are those who try to reclaim Baal, not the demon or heretic, but the god of rain and thunder, a force of fertility, of balance, of storms that both nourish and destroy. These attempts are rare, fragmented, and often met with suspicion, because Baal's name has been soaked in blood for so long, most who hear it no longer think of crops or kingship. They think of fire, of sacrifice, of demons with 3 heads. Baal is terrifying because he isn't the monster. We are. A god of life who was killed by the hands of men who feared their rivals more than they feared the heavens. And we never stopped. We still find things to demonize, ideas, people, entire cultures, turning a name into a weapon, a word into a curse. The story of Baal isn't a warning about what we should be afraid of. It's a terrifying lesson in how we create our monsters.